you ever had a moment where your entire life split into before and after? For me, that moment was Hurricane Katrina. But to really understand who I became after the storm, you first have to know who I was before it hit. The girl with the deep roots in New Orleans, on a daily life full of small routines, no clue that everything was about to change. Before Katrina, my life was already teaching me resilience. Um, I grew up in foster care at different times of my life. Two very distinct times that I remember the most. And there were also seasons when we lived in shelters. There were nights when our lights and our water were cut off. And I can remember, like, as a child growing up, those moments left me feeling really uncertain and just angry. Um, Most of the pictures that I have of myself, I'm not smiling, and if I am smiling, it was those moments where I found moments of peace. Um, at one point, my mom ended up losing custody, and that meant that somebody had to step up. And at the time, my Auntie Glow was the person who stepped up and took care of us. And it was not easy. There was me, Chanel, Chevelle, and I think my little brother, little Wallace. And we didn't know like what was coming. And so questions about like why my life felt so unstable, I didn't have answers to it. But I know having her come in and step in and then losing her shortly after, that definitely changed me. And we ended up going back with my mom. And I didn't realize it at the time. Like, there was a lot that she just was not able to give, was not able to provide. So we ended up being taken again. And this time, I think the courts decided that the only way they were going to allow us to go back with her was for someone to come and stay with us. And that's when um, my Aunt Estelle came into the picture. And she definitely was that saving grace, more so because it was all of us at this point. And I don't know. And she brought something that was very unique about her spirit. I never really um, was a person that felt without God. Even with my Auntie Glow, I remember going to church. Church was always something that I enjoyed, I loved, and I look forward to. And so I remember, I think it's called Mount Zion Baptist Church. And from what I can remember, I don't know if it was like this downstairs basement type area, and they would always have like plates that they would serve, and the food was like really really good. And I remember coming outside every Sunday, and I don't know why, if we were either taking pictures or maybe people were just outside congregating, but those are the moments that make me smile. It makes me think about like being a part of something that was bigger than myself. So those moments stuck with me. And so then we ended up with my Aunt Estelle. And her religion was very different. Before, when we stayed with our mom, I think we stayed in Gerttown, and every Saturday she would get up and she would go to church. And I thought that was the weirdest thing. Like, who goes to church on Saturday, right? And so, because of the stuff that was going on at home, I was like, I don't want to be here. So, I just, every Saturday she lived down the street from us, I would just get in a car with her and she would take me to church. Now, she was very adamant, you come to church, you need to listen, you need to pay attention. But she was also singing in the choir, so I would just get in the pew and I would just fall asleep. I don't remember how old I was, but I do know like I ended up being baptized. And that was like my very first like introduction into the Seventh Day Adventist church. But my aunt was very intentional about how she taught it to us. So it really started off with doing Bible study, going to Sabbath school. That was me and Sabbath school became like best friends. That was my time to like ask questions. And not only that, other kids my age were asking similar, if not even more interesting questions. And knowing what I was going home to, I don't think other people were dealing with the things that I was dealing with. So it was really interesting to see like this God that they're talking about, this Jesus. Does he know what I'm going through? Does he know what is happening when I go home? And I grew to know that he does. And that was a moment of like understanding everything that you're going through is not for nothing. Trust that it's not for nothing. So, most of my memories of my childhood, it really consists of me riding my bike. I rode my bike or we walked literally everywhere. So, my mom never got her license. Um, and I never even dreamed of getting my license because it wasn't in my it wasn't a part of my world. But I do know every time I would stand at the bus stop and I would see these Nissan Altimas pass by, and I would say, you know what? When I get older, I'm gonna buy me a Nissan Altima because I really like the tail lights. But just knowing my life and what was going on, my biggest aspiration was to work at rallies. I am obsessed. When I say obsessed, I know for sure that in order to understand some of the things that I'm going to share later on about my story, I didn't really have like an emotional attachment or connection with my mom or my family, really. And I don't think it was anything intentional like towards them. I just think, or maybe I felt like people knew what was going on, but they didn't really know like how to step in or how to help. And so there was a lot of like just confusion and not really knowing. Like even when we would go visit some of our relatives, I saw how they lived. I saw, you know, the differences of what I was dealing with versus what I would see when we go for holidays and stuff like that. So I think it more so just left me more confused more than anything. And it wasn't until like we started to get on our feet with my aunt Estelle that I really saw like, okay, not everybody water is getting cut off or not everybody's lights isn't working, you know. So why is this happening to us? Why is this happening to me? And so there was just things that I think now looking back I'm able to see um and understand that there was a lot of lack of understanding of the importance of I have these people that I'm in charge of, and I can't just do the bare minimum. There's more of myself. I don't know if my mom ever really got that or had the ability to grasp that. So, a key thing about my family is mental illness runs very deep, very, very deep. So social workers were in and out of our home all the time, all the time. But I think what made it more impactful was that there were so many social workers that they really wanted things to be better for us. They really wanted us to like have these tools and these resources and tapping into like the community and seeking help. I remember at school on Friday and just a normal day, going to school, going to my classes. I had one, two, I think like three really, really, really good friends, and um, we were very, very goofy. But one thing I can always remember that in all of my friend groups, I was always known as like the mother hen or the one who um, was very timid, very shy, um, but very silly at the same time. And so I don't remember what class it was, but it had to have been close to the end of the day. So we were getting ready to leave, and I rode the city bus home at that time. And I remember my teacher very vividly saying, like, this may be the last time I see you guys, so be safe and take care of yourself. I was, I thought that was the strangest thing. Like, maybe he's going on vacation, maybe he's, you know, changing jobs. I don't know. I did not watch the news at all. So at this point, I think it was like Friday the 27th, I was very oblivious to like what was about to happen, what was truly getting ready to take place. So, as usual, I get on the bus, I take the bus home, and Friday, I'm a 7-day Adventist, so we're getting ready for to prepare for the Sabbath, right? Um, I can't remember at that time if my aunt had a car, and if she did, if it was working. I felt like the majority of our comings and goings took place on the public transportation, like on the bus. So I don't remember specifically. But we wake up like we normally do, get ready, go to church, and we caught the. I'm assuming we caught the bus to church, but I can't remember. That's the frustrating thing. But yeah, so get to church, go to Sabbath school. That was literally my favorite part. Um, but I remember very vividly, like right in the middle of church, the pastor stops. He was like, I can't remember verbatim, but something along the lines of, "We got to cut church short. We're being issued a requirement to evacuate," and obviously them wanting to give us time to do that. And so we just get up. I don't remember the vibe. Like, were people whispering? I don't remember if my aunt was saying anything. I don't know. I just remember church being cut short, and that was the reason why. Sunday the 28th, we it was just a normal day. I think it was around Sunday night. Yeah, Sunday night. I was in my room and I was just watching TV. Now, one of the things you got to know about New Orleans, majority of the houses are what we call shotgun houses. So you open the door to the front door, and that you can literally see all the way through the house, all the way into the back door. Um, this house was an upstairs and downstairs, obviously, but it had a balcony. So there was a balcony on the outside. And when you go out on the balcony, You could see the whole city. I loved it. I loved it so much. So Sunday night, just watching TV. Of course, I don't remember what I was watching, but whatever it was, I was definitely into it. And till I hear a knock on the door, and next door to me, um, me and the girl, we ended up becoming friends. Obviously, next door neighbor, so she would always come over, um, because I don't think her room was there, but I know for sure she would always come out the back door, and we would either sit out on the balcony and talk, or she would come out and knock on my door and come into my room, and we would hang out. So I already knew who it was when I heard the knock. So I get up, I go open the door, and she was like, "Hey, where are you guys going for the hurricane?" And I was like, "What you mean? Like, where are we going?" She's like, "Well, I heard that they were requiring everybody to evacuate. And so my mom and them, I don't remember if she told me like where her mom and them were going. Um, but I just told her, I was like, well, they told us to go home. We were sent home early from church. But as far as I knew, like my mom wasn't saying anything or my aunt from what I could remember. So I was like, okay. She asked me if we were gonna leave, and I was just like, she's like, "Girl, it's a category 5." I don't know if I turned the TV to the news. I'm not really sure, but I run downstairs and my aunt was in the kitchen. I don't know if she was making anything, but she was in the kitchen, and I asked her if we were going anywhere, for the hurricane. And she told me she's been getting a lot of phone calls from people like warning us, telling us that we need to evacuate. And for some reason, she was like, "What do you think?" And I was like, "Well, it sounds like it's serious, and everybody is like, we should go." And so she's like, "Okay." So I was like, "All right, everybody, let's pack up. Let's get, as much as we can." Now, the unique thing about the packing, right? I was always a planner. There was always a part of like just who I was, just because of the life that we live. And so it was like a little blue suitcase. And in that suitcase, I put some clothes. I packed like some Uno cards. And then I went downstairs in the kitchen and I was like grabbing snacks. And I just happened to grab like a loaf of bread, some peanut butter and jelly. I remember getting like a notebook and some pens. Like I was just making sure that I was ready and prepared, right? We had in our house at the time, it was my Aunt Estelle, my mom, my sister, Chevelle, my little brother, Josh, my little sister, Tricia, and my little cousin, Dernika. And that was my aunt's granddaughter. So that was all of us, right? And, my next door neighbor, she decided that they would be the people to help transport us. We having 8 people in our house, and they had 7 people in their house, and there was like 15 altogether. So there was no way that their car, which at the time only hold 5 people. So her mom, from my understanding, had to make 3 trips just to get us all there. So we get there, and of course, everybody in the city is coming to this place, so we had to wait in line. There were so many people, so many people. It really felt like the entire city was there. So when we get in line, I remember there was this police officer, and he was standing there, and I had asked him, I was like, "Hey, how long do you think until we will be able to go home?" And he, serious face, no like joking, he was like, probably about 3 months. And I remember just laughing, and I'm like joking with my friend, like, he's just trying to scare us. he was serious. He was very serious. And but even as we're going up into the Superdome, and for those who don't know what the Superdome looks like, obviously it's a stadium where, we have our football Saints, go Saints. Um, and, so you have the field, you have the seats where people sit, then you have the area that, in my opinion, I feel like it surrounded the whole place. And that was like the concession stands, like the bathrooms, and so on and so forth. So we go into the part where they start having everybody sit in the seats. Well, as we're sitting in the seats, that's when the rain started, and you could hear the wind like almost howling. Like it really felt like demons, in all honesty, was like beating on the roof. So my concept of time from that point on, I lost it. I couldn't verbatim say like, and this and this and this. So the stories that I'll share after this was just collections of memories from what I felt like stood out to me. But obviously there was a whole lot more that took place. Out of nowhere, the roof actually started to leak where we were sitting. And I don't know if the National Guard was called in to manage us as we were using the Superdome as a shelter, but I remember soldiers being there. And so all of a sudden, they started ordering everyone to a different level. So I want to say we ended up moving to like the concession stand part, if I can remember. It's very vague, but I do remember one point I was walking to the restroom and I saw this lady who had just given birth to her baby. Like the baby was covered in blood, and she was washing the baby off with a bottle of water they had given us, over the trash can. I was just like, okay, this is just unreal. Like I didn't even have an emotional response. It was just, yeah. And on the way to the restroom, this lady grabs me by the hand and asks me like where my parents were. And so I told her, and she told me that a little girl and a little boy were killed and thrown into the restroom. And she told me like, go with your parents and never walk anywhere by yourself. I listened, and from that day on, I never used the restroom while I was there. And so I don't know how that's physically possible. I don't know if that is 100% true, but I don't have any memories of myself using the restroom. Like that it terrified me. Monday, I think, is when the hurricane actually really hit. So me and my friend, we were playing Uno, and we were sitting next to like the balcony area. Like, I don't know, it's hard. If I find a picture of what it looks like, I'll definitely include a picture. But while we were playing, I heard something hit the ground really, really hard. And so I get up and, being nosy, trying to figure out what it was, I go over and I look over the balcony, and a man is just laying there. And I hear people screaming, I hear people shouting. And apparently, this guy committed suicide. And when I saw what I saw, I just remember backing away from the balcony. Like, I couldn't believe my eyes. And, after the people came, they like covered the man, I want to say with like a sheet, and they took the man's body, and we were told to move again to like another level. Now, I don't remember what the Superdome looks like. I don't remember the structure. but we kept having to move because whatever was happening around us, it kept getting more and more unsafe. And so, even as I tell this story, I still remember the thud. I still remember the sound of that man's body hitting the ground and looking over the balcony, not knowing what it was. But when I saw it, it was like, this can't be real. There's no way that this man just, I don't know what was going on. I don't, obviously, but I don't know. It was just too much to process. So later, my family and we were sitting and we hear this like really loud noise. And it was like a big crowd. And it was. And I remember seeing like this crowd was just pushing this man down the hall, and they were screaming and they were shouting, "We caught him, we caught him." And they were saying this over and over. And then a man from the crowd, I guess somebody had asked, "What happened? What's going on?" And the man, he said he took a little girl into the bathroom, and when the soldiers heard this, they grabbed the man over the barricades that separated us from them, and they just started beating this man in front of us, and they like threw him in a truck, and they just took him where I guess the other prisoners were. So when you think about the Superdome, it's the where the concession stands were, or wherever we were, it was big enough that an actual vehicle could like drive through. So that changed everything for me. I was terrified. And I don't I don't remember sleeping after that. I don't even know if like I slept, but if I did, it definitely wasn't anything like, like a person would normally sleep. There was a lot of stuff that ended up happening after that. Um it just felt everything just felt so unreal. Like, again, I lost concept of time. So when they moved us the second time, we were, I guess, in the hallways of by the concession stands. And so the craziest thing is my my family and my next door neighbor's family, I'm assuming at this time we just continued to stay together. And we were laying down on the floor. I don't know if there was a blanket or a pallet. I don't know. But I just remember us laying down. And I turned to her and I was like, our teachers are going to make us write about this, right? And she's like, "Yeah, you're right." And so I was like, "Well, I brought a notebook and paper. Do you want to like write our paper now?" And so that way, when we get to school, when we get back to school, we'll already have our paper done. Still to this moment, I'm thinking we're gonna go back home. Our teachers are gonna like want us to write about our experience in the Superdome. So me and my friend are writing an essay about our experience, like what's happening, writing pretty much writing our story. I was such a nerd. I don't know if it was like me just trying to get ahead of the game, or like trying to like not have to do more work, because I just knew they were going to want us to write about this. But it never dawned on me in those moments that I would never see the New Orleans that I knew again. I remember the storm hitting because wherever we were, you could see outside. Like I remember seeing like the rain was literally falling, like, well, I shouldn't say falling, but the rain was like this because the winds were so strong. Um by this time, the power had gone out after the storm and there was no running water. And so the only thing at that time we had was MREs. But luckily for me, I had the peanut butter and jelly that I had still had in my backpack. And that's literally what I survived off of. Like, that was all that I ate. Um, but later on, I don't know if it was later that day or later that week. And the thing you got to know about the bathrooms in the Superdome, there were a lot of stalls, but the best way, if I find a picture, I'll definitely upload it. But there was this big, almost like basin. I mean, that's the best way I can describe it. And if I remember correctly, you would press this circular thing at the bottom, and that's what turned the water on. So in the beginning, I remember it working, but some point down the line, the water stopped working, and so obviously sewage wasn't working. It got so bad that I remember my mom and I, we were trying to go to the bathroom, and it was the feces. I'm assuming the toilets ended up getting stopped up, but in that basin, people started to use the bathroom. Like, fecal matter and urine, it filled that basin up to the brim. And you were walking through stuff on the bathroom floor. Like, it was horrible. And so I don't know how we got this cup, but that, I remember that was how my sister was able to go to the bathroom. Like, she had to pee in a cup. So as we were leaving, this man, like, I don't know where this person came from, but he grabs my sister's arm and tries to, like, pull her into the bathroom. And I remember me and my mom, we were like fighting and yelling and screaming, like, help. And I don't know what happened. Like, I don't know if somebody came to our rescue, and I don't know if he ran off or I don't know. It was just so much chaos. It was so much stuff going on that it was like a movie. It just was like scene after scene after scene, and they just kept getting worse and worse and worse. I don't think I ever shared this with anybody, but I don't know how soon after the hurricane hit, because it hit on a Monday. They set up these barricades, and at some point, they had to have given the okay that we were allowed to leave the Superdome. But if we were to leave, we were not able to come back in. Maybe it was relief because it was a lot of people there. I don't really know. But my friend came to me and she was like, hey, my mom and my dad, we're going to go back to our house and see, the damage and everything. And of course, I was like, okay, cool, I'll go with you guys. I don't think I told my mom, or maybe I told my mom, but the dynamics between the relationship with my mom, it wasn't where she would have stopped me, discouraged me not to go, or anything like that. So I'm just going to assume, for the sake of this story, that I didn't tell them. And so they had a basket. Where they got this basket from, I literally have no idea. And I can't remember if I had my suitcase with me or not. I think it really was just, I'm sick and tired of this place and I want to leave. They're leaving. I'm going with them. I remember there was a soldier standing there, and he told him, if you leave, you cannot come back. And I'm assuming her mom was like, whatever. We get past the barricade, and in the Superdome, there's these two like ramps, I guess, and we were almost down the ramp, and all of a sudden, I hear my name being called, Sherelle, girl, what are you doing? And so I turn around, and I see my aunt. Words cannot describe the terror, but the anger on my aunt's face. In that moment, I was 15. There was a lot of stuff going on in my life. But as I look back and really reflect on that, it showed me that I left my family to go with my neighbor. I didn't have any emotional connection or ties to these people who were my family. And in that moment, obviously I wasn't thinking about that, but as I look back, that really showed me the severity of how detached emotionally I was. So the soldier, of course, is telling my aunt, you can't go past this, because if you go past, you're not allowed back in. And I don't remember exactly, but I remember her, that's my niece. She does not have my permission to go with them. Something along those lines, right? And she came, he's like, go get her, ma'am. She allowed her to go. When I tell you my aunt snatched me up, you just think you're grown. You think that you can just make decisions. You are not grown. And I remember looking back, and I see my friend and her family just walking off. And that was such a pivotal moment for me, because I know it's sad to say, but I've realized like how much she really and truly cared for me. How much like I mattered to her. And I know that's crazy, but it just, I didn't feel that. Like I know I was still angry, because it wasn't like she was taking me home. She was taking me right back into this place of hell. I did not want to go back there. But anyway, so we go back. I don't know if she continued to scold me. I'm pretty sure she did. I don't know if a conversation was had, but we never discussed that moment again. I didn't tell anybody. Those were those like pivotal moments, like what would have happened? You took it upon yourself to make this major decision to go with your friend. And even then, that's how I knew like the weight of what was actually happening, it didn't truly dawn on me. You don't know what you were going to and going to go to. So, but yeah. A lady, she just came from around the corner. I don't know who she was, but I remember her saying like, hey, we're going to be leaving here soon. They're going to get buses and they're going to be taking us to Texas, and we're going to be well taken care of. And I was like excited. I was like, okay, like we're getting ready to like go. So I was like, all right, cool. And then one day goes by, nothing. And then another day goes by, and I mean, like I said, so many people were inside of the dome, so I didn't even see that lady who had said that again. And it felt like out of nowhere, all of a sudden, we were all told to get up, go outside, and line up. So at this point, we were still, I don't think we were out down at the field. I think we were still at the concession part of the dome. But I remember packing my suitcase, putting all of my stuff in it. We go through these doors on our way outside, I guess. And when I say outside, I mean like the way the Superdome was built, there was like this area that wrapped around, or it was an area that like connected to, either it was, I can't remember if it was the mall or it was another area, but it wasn't like we were outside on the ground, right? So the very first thing I remember the soldiers saying was, women and children first. But I remember very vividly like the men literally pushing past people, knocking people down. Um, it was just crazy. There were barricades. So they usually use these during the parade season. And so they would have like the barricades and they would hook onto each other, right? And that would be what would separate the people from interfering with the parade. So they got a hold of these and they had these barricades that they had on each side, because the opening to go to the other side, it was very wide. And I'm assuming they put the barricades to control just a stampede, to be honest. But there was a very small opening that they left between the barricades. And it was very, very tiny, where you only could pass through one by one. And so imagine you have these barricades and people are pushing. I mean, we were so close, packed in that space, that it was just a nightmare. Now, mind you, there was no water. So we were not showered. We were not, there was no power in the dome. So when I say you were close, but it wasn't a good kind of close. It was bad. We had not showered. It had to have been for 5 days. I honestly couldn't tell you, but at minimum 3 to 5 days without a shower. Really, no running water. So because the men kept coming and pushing past, the soldiers kept pushing and making everyone go back inside. This probably happened like 5 or 7 times, over and over and over. And I remember like that third or fourth time, I couldn't take it anymore. I burst into tears. I remember crying so hard, because here we were, so close to freedom, to getting out of this place, and every single time we would mess up, or we wouldn't do it right, or it wasn't according to the way that they wanted, we were told to go back. And I was just so frustrated. I just started praying. I was crying. It felt like the end of the world. It felt like we were the left behind. We were the forgotten, because of, I don't know, maybe we weren't living, I don't know. Like, there was just so much. There was so much going through my head at the time. But eventually, they started to do whatever they needed to do, and people started going through the hole. And it was like, in the movies, like when you pray and this light comes shining down on like the main character in the movie. But it truly felt like after I broke down, I started crying and I prayed, things just started to go. So while the people were going through the line, or going through that little opening, I noticed that all my family was on the other side, and I was still waiting to go through. When I tell you, utter panic went through me, like I was freaking out. So as I was trying to pass, I think it was like two men, and they had this lady. Was she in a wheelchair? Yeah, she was in a wheelchair, and they were trying to come through. So imagine this space, then somebody in a wheelchair. I personally don't even know if that lady was able to get through. I have no idea. So as I'm trying to pass through, I moved to the side and I bumped into one of the soldiers' gun, and I ended up dropping my suitcase. I was so scared. If I had moved maybe like an inch, because his hand was on that trigger, that's how violent and chaotic it was, that I believe that that gun would have went off. So he told me, just leave your stuff and get through. I of course did what he said, but in that moment, that suitcase was all that I had, that of my true belongings, of what identified me as me. I don't know how many clothes I packed, but I was able to change clothes even though I wasn't able to shower. And so leaving that behind, um I that was, I don't know why, but that was so, I remember looking back and seeing the suitcase on the ground, and a part of me was like, I wanted to go back and grab it. I really did. But I didn't have any choice. I left it. So we were walking in line to get to the buses. I don't know, something happened and everyone just hit the ground. And you know, black people, if people running, I'm running. If people hit the ground, I'm hitting the ground. And all of a sudden, as we look up, a bunch of soldiers came running with their guns. I still to this day don't know exactly what happened, but no one ended up getting hurt. But we ended up making it to a door. And I remember the water at that time, I think it was a little above our ankles. So there was just this line, this row of buses. And so we ended up all getting on the bus. And like I said, the buses were taking us to Texas. But that was the first time that we were actually able to see the city. So we drive out from the Superdome, but there was another like dome like place, or maybe like convention center, maybe, that people were staying in. And I remember us passing that. I just remember going through the city and finally seeing all of the destruction that the hurricane did. And I couldn't even take it all in because I was exhausted. And I remember that was the first time I actually was able to sleep. And I have no idea how long I slept, or if those buses took us directly, like straight to Texas. But I had to have slept the whole entire time because when I woke up, we were in Texas. And I remember we had to be checked in. So whenever, I guess they were already preparing for us to be there. And so when we got there, I knew we had to be checked in. And I was just thinking, man, I already know that this is going to take all day. So I remember like walking in the door, and the police officer didn't tell me anything. So I got checked in. Did they give us wristbands? I think they gave us wristbands. And I asked the man, could I have some like for my family? And he gave them to me. So we were all able to go inside. I remember we were given clothes, food, and a mat to sleep on. And I remember like we had to like sign up for housing, but my mom and my aunt, they did that while I was watching my brothers and sisters. I don't know time, like I said, at this point, I don't know what day it is. I don't know when we arrived in Texas, but we were at another dome. I think it was like the Astrodome, I believe. Yeah, it was the Astrodome that we were at. I remember being able to take our very first shower. Man, because we were just, yeah. It was bad. Um, and it was a lot of the same type of clothing. I remember very vividly there were these baby blue tank tops, and I just remember grabbing like a bunch of them. And I think I actually have a picture. I'm gonna see if I can find it. But I think even 2 years after that, I still had this this baby blue tank top. So we had that, but of course, we didn't have anything to carry our stuff. So we had trash bags. That was really all the stuff that we had. So each of us had a trash bag with our hygiene, with the new clothes that they gave us, and then like just food and water and stuff. I remember us getting on this like train um, in Texas, and we went to Walmart. I remember my mom um, taking us to Walmart. I don't know if I had a CD player already or if she ended up buying me one. I don't know. It was just really weird. But we got to Walmart, and there was we went to the aisle. Music was like huge in our family. My mom loved listening to R&B, all of the music, and so it was for me too. But at that time, most of the music that I listened to was Christian. In the store, there was, I don't know if it was the new Mary Mary album, but I just ended up buying that album. Like, that was the first thing that I bought after this, after everything had happened. And so on our way back from Walmart, I opened it, put the CD in my CD player. And it's so funny because my kids literally have no idea what that is. But anyway, so I put it in my CD player and I put my headphones on. And that CD, it breathed life into me. And the song that stands out to me is like, I'm a believer. And I love that song so much because here I had this traumatic experience, right? Up until this point. And I clung to God, but it just felt so like, God, why? Why would you allow this hurricane to come and to just destroy everything that I ever known? Like, I was really angry, in all honesty. I was very angry with God during that time. But listening to that, Mary Mary album, like every single song was just so inspiring and it encouraged me. And I didn't give up hope, but I was still very lost. They put us in school. I think the school was like Jones High School or something like that in Texas. And I remember being in the school, and it had to have been either like gang affiliation or just like an overflow of new people coming into your school. So there were a lot of tensions, and there were a lot of fights that broke out to the point where whoever was in charge of us at that time, I remember them pulling us out of school, and then we didn't go back to school anymore. So I probably went for like 1 or 2 days, if I can remember correctly, but it didn't last long. It may have been like a week and a half went by. I'm not really sure, but there was an announcement, and they said like another hurricane was coming to Texas. And I just was like, really, God? I was just like, there's no way another hurricane is coming. And I think I don't know if they had a name for it at that time, but it was Hurricane Rita. And so where we were staying, I believe they gave everybody the same option. I don't know, but they gave people tickets to go wherever that they felt they needed to go. But we didn't have anywhere to go. Everyone that we knew, everything that I knew, I should say, it was in New Orleans, right? So we had no idea But everybody who didn't have anywhere else to go, they said that they would be taking us to Arkansas. I just remember Arkansas. I just was terrified. And so we get to this, I felt like we took a bus, and then from a bus we took a plane, but I don't know. But I remember very vividly, like, we've never been on a plane, never thought we would ever be on a plane. And I was so scared. I was like, is there anywhere else we can go? I was like, I remember talking to my aunt and my mom, and then we were like, none of us have been on, actually, my aunt probably have, but I know me and my mom and them, we've never been on a plane. So I think Auntie Estelle and my mom, I guess they talked amongst themselves, and we decided, like, well, I guess Arkansas it is, because we didn't have anywhere else to go. And surprisingly enough, the plane, it actually wasn't that bad. But I don't remember like how long it was, like the specifics of where we landed. But anyways, we arrive in Arkansas, and I remember like there were a bunch of people there waiting to meet us. And was it the governor? I think the governor of Arkansas, he met us when the plane had landed. And I remember him saying, like, he was like, not to worry, that everything's going to be okay. And, you know, it was different. It was very different. So we were at like this military training camp for a week. And I'll actually show you guys a picture. There was actually a picture taken of me and my little brother of us first arriving at this military camp, because from the plane we took buses. Yeah, we took buses. After we left the training camp for a week, they then took us to, I think it's called Arkansas Baptist Assembly Camp, right? And so here we get to this camp, and we had, I think we were assigned to cabins. And that was the first time like we were actually inside, like what the closest thing that like resembled a home, right? And I just remember like, man, we can finally relax. Now, of course, there was a lot of paperwork that my aunt and my mom had to sign. I mean, it was just a bunch. I don't remember how long we were there, but at that time, again, signing up for housing, signing up for all of this stuff. But it was probably like a week, maybe like a week went by. And I just noticed that like my mom wasn't acting the same. Like I guess she couldn't take it anymore. I don't know. But Arkansas is nothing, absolutely nothing like New Orleans. So I knew for her, I shouldn't say I knew for her, I felt like that was too drastic of a change. So I don't know what happened. Obviously, however much time went by, that they were offering people bus tickets to be able to go wherever they wanted to go, I'm assuming. I don't know. So she ended up getting bus tickets to go to where my grandmother was. I think at that time my grandmother was in Franklin, Louisiana. And she got tickets for all of us. But something happened where Auntie Estelle decided that she wanted to stay at the camp. And I think the reason why was because there were Adventist volunteers. And so she must have linked up with them, is my assumption. And so I remember them standing, and I don't know if my mom asked me like, are you coming with us? deciding, like, I don't want to go. I didn't want to go with her, and there were a lot of reasons why. But I remember the main reason was I was very new in my faith, and I felt like no one outside of my aunt practiced my faith, like going to church on Saturday, right? Keeping the Sabbath. And so I just felt like if I were to go with her, there would be no one to advocate for me to practice what I believe so strongly in at that time. And then I also felt like at this time the courts had given custody of me and my siblings to my aunt, but of course there was no way of like verifying that. And one thing you gotta know about my mom, we call it a pocketbook, right? My mom carried around the biggest pocketbook known to man, and every single piece of paper that she, for me, it felt like every paper that she ever received was in that book, that her purse. And so somehow she had old custody papers, because something happened, I guess, where her and my aunt were arguing back and forth about her taking my brothers and sisters, or us, I'm assuming, with her, and my aunt and my cousin staying here in Arkansas. So, but because she had those custody papers, they had to go off of that versus just what my aunt was saying. And I still remember my little sister's face, and just a little backstory of like the makeup of my family. Mental illness and developmental disabilities run very deep in my family. And so my sister, who was the fourth oldest, right under me, she has autism. She wasn't as vocal. She would say like one or two words and she would repeat them. But I just grew up with her, so I always was I was always like her interpreter or whatever. But she and I were very close. She would always like braids, braids, braids. And so I always was able to practice, like how I became good at doing hair was her. She always wanted me to braid her hair, always wanted me to do different styles, and she was always willing to allow me to practice on her because she got her braids, right? It was for her birthday. I don't know how old she turned, but you can see the braids that I had did in her hair. So I remember her face, and she couldn't articulate, I want to stay with Sherelle, or I want to stay with Auntie Estelle. But she was like, stay. And because I don't know, I just know my mom, for the first time, was very like adamant about, no, these are my kids and they're going with me. But she never really had that hold on me as far as like my autonomy. And so I was able to say, no, I'm not going, and I didn't want to go. So they ended up leaving. And again, in retrospect, there wasn't emotional attachment or connection. Like there was an insecure attachment between my mother and I. Obviously, I knew she was my mom. I loved her, but there was a lot of stuff that happened in my childhood that just, nothing compelled me to want to go with her to see my family, and it's not anything against them, right? It's just before Katrina, Like I knew what my life was going to be like. I was saying, like, when I turn 16, I'm going to work at rallies. And that was as high as my aspirations went. I don't remember, like, oh, I'm going to go to college and I'm going to get married, or, I don't know. And it could have been. I just don't remember. So all I did was walk around the camp every day. I just remember I love going on walks. One day I asked one of the cafeteria workers if they knew of, like, an Adventist church around. She told me she didn't really know, but if she found out anything, she would let me know. So again, I don't know the timestamps of anything, but for some reason it had to have been a Monday. I don't know why, but it was a Monday, and I decided to take another walk. And as I was walking, the worker who I had asked came up to me, and she said, "Hey, I have some people I want you to meet. They're from the Gentry Seventh-day Adventist Church." And so they asked me if I was in school, and I told them no. And one of the ladies said that there was a school. Yeah, there was a school across the street from their church called Ozark. So the next day, they took me on a tour of the school. And no lie, like, by that evening, I was enrolled in the dorm. Like, that's how fast it happened. Like, one day, I'm sitting in this cabin, and I'm watching TV. And the next day, I'm, like, enrolled in school at Ozark. Now, let me tell you why this is so significant and why this is so important, right? At 12, when I got baptized, we were going to Caffin Avenue Seventh-day Adventist Church, right? And we continued to, like, go to church, but there was this school. There was the church school right across. Well, I mean, not even right across. It was still in the same parking lot. Oh, I think it went to 8th grade, but I wanted to go to that school so bad. I even remember being so angry because of, obviously, it costs money, and my aunt or my mom couldn't afford it at the time, and so I remember going to 8th grade. I was so angry. I was like, why can't I go to Adventist school? Like, I always felt like an outsider, but when I became an Adventist, it just because of the things that I practiced, I took on the diet of not eating pork or meat. And so that, like, isolated me even more. And, Friday night, we did things as a family. Like, my aunt made Sabbaths, like Friday nights, very interactive. But still, there was a lot of things, like, as a kid, you just naturally miss out on. So, full circle, to be enrolled into an Adventist high school, and this was a boarding school, so you actually stayed at the school because they had dormitories and stuff. I had the option, actually, now that I think about it, to stay with my aunt because they ended up getting her an apartment. Was it a 2-bedroom? Yeah, it was a 2-bedroom apartment. So they set us up she ended up getting a car. Like, Arkansas took care of us. It was a huge blessing. But I was like, I want to stay in the dorms. Like, it was just a unique experience. And that was such a full circle moment to me, because I didn't realize that was something that I truly wanted. And from my standpoint, there's no way that would have been able to happen. Me being able to go to my faith-based school, I don't know. And I was like, I loved it. I still miss my family, of course, because at that time, I don't remember having any contact with my family, because we didn't have, I didn't have a cell phone at the time. But it was just so crazy because I remember days where I was in English class, and I think the teacher name was Miss Eno. I could be butchering that. I honestly don't know. But they would get so quiet just to hear me read. Because what Miss Eno would do is everybody would take turns reading. And so when it would come to my turn, they would be like, shh. I remember the one kid, shh, we want to hear her read. Oh. It was just crazy. Like, culturally, like the environment, everything was just so different. But yeah, that was like such a full circle moment for me. And that whole experience changed my life in so many ways. And the biggest thing is like, I remember growing up in church, and the grown-ups would be like, God's got a blessing and everything, or God's gonna work it out. And I just was like, okay. We kids, we dismiss so much stuff. But even though it was the worst thing that happened to me, it also was the best thing that happened to me. And in so many ways. And the reason why is because I gained more than what I lost. And it took me a long time to really realize that. After 20 years, this is all that I have left. The only piece of who I was in picture form before Katrina. When you go through something as traumatic as Hurricane Katrina was, and then the events that followed after, I think that was really the part where I began to start to change. I knew going to school, I learned a lot about trauma. I learned a lot about how our brain shuts down to protect us, to preserve us, really. And the unfortunate thing for me is that I was never able to recover a lot of who I am. Our memories, they aren't just snippets of who we were when we were younger. They're a part of our identity. And not having that, for me, left a really big hole, a really an empty space of me trying to find who I was. At the time, I didn't have words for it, but Katrina became almost kind of like this rapture. When the storm came, it didn't just devastate like my city, it really interrupted my life in a way that it forced me out of one reality and into another, really. And so as I look back, I see that Katrina was, in its own painful way, it was an escape from a path that felt very uncertain. It pushed me into new environments and new choices that, while difficult, eventually they led me toward growth and possibilities I couldn't have imagined. And so even now, as a private practice owner, one of my prayers has always been to God was, Lord, I went through a lot, and I know I didn't go through those things for nothing. So send me the clients who need to know how to get out of what they're going through. And the crazy thing is, he did. Every single client that I've had has had parts and pieces of my story, and just letting them know like there is a path beyond where you are right now. It may feel like there isn't, but it definitely is. So I hope that me sharing my story, it encourages someone else out there, because the biggest thing that I learned is that the worst thing that could possibly happen to you, it doesn't have to define you. It doesn't have to be like your story. You get to turn the page and start afresh and start anew. If I wake up, I don't care what else happens, I'm blessed, you know? But yeah, that's me.